July 1st, 1863. In a small, unassuming farming town in southern Pennsylvania, the roads converged. Two massive armies, blinded by the heat and the fog of war, collided in a chance encounter that would alter the trajectory of a nation. For 3 days, the ground shook with the roar of cannon fire, the rattle of musketry, and the screams of 51,000 men. It remains the bloodiest battle ever fought on North American soil. The scale of the carnage was so immense that the town's population of 2,400 was eclipsed 10 times over by the dead and wounded left behind. History books tell us the armies marched away on July 4th, leaving the rain to wash away the blood. They tell us the war moved south and the town began the slow, painful process of rebuilding. But there is a prevailing belief among the locals who have lived here for generations, the park rangers who patrol these fields at night, and the investigators who flock to this site from around the world. They believe that the energy of that violence never truly left. There is a theory known in paranormal research as the stone tape. It suggests that high-intensity emotional events, terror, rage, sudden agony, can be imprinted onto the environment itself. The unique geology of Gettysburg, the granite, the iron-rich water, and the limestone, acts as a recording device, capturing the tragedy of 1863 and playing it back on an eternal spectral loop. The battle may be over in the history books, but for the spirits bound to this soil, the order to cease fire was never given. On the morning of the first day, the fighting centered around this unfinished excavation west of town. It was a natural trench carved deep into the earth, intended for commerce, but it became a death trap. Confederate soldiers from Mississippi rushed into the cut seeking cover, only to find themselves hemmed in by the Iron Brigade. The slaughter that followed was intimate and brutal. Hundreds were gunned down or captured in a space no wider than a city street, trapped between steep rocky walls with nowhere to run. Today, the railroad cut is quiet, often bypassed by tourists heading to the more famous monuments. But the silence here is deceptive. Residents living near the ridge have reported the same phenomenon for decades. On hot July nights, when the air is heavy and still, the sound of metal clashing against rock echoes from the trench. There are reports of a phantom battalion, a group of men in ragged gray uniforms seen lining the ridge, looking down into the cut with expressions of horror before dissolving into the tree line. One specific account details a reenactor who, while walking the cut alone at dawn, was approached by a man in a Union uniform. The man was blackened with gunpowder, his eyes wide with shock, asking simply, "Which way to the aid station?" When the reenactor pointed toward the town, the soldier nodded, took 2 steps, and faded into the morning mist, leaving nothing behind but a chill in the air. Moving south, we encounter a landscape that looks as if it were designed for ambush, Devil's Den. Even the name suggests a place of malevolence. Geologically, it is a maze of massive boulders, some the size of houses, scattered across a steep hill. Tactically, during the battle, it was a sniper's paradise and a slaughterhouse. The fighting here was chaotic, hand-to-hand combat where bodies fell into deep crevices and remained undiscovered for days, rotting in the summer sun. This area is notorious for its effect on modern electronics, a phenomenon often associated with high paranormal energy. Professional photographers frequently find their fully charged batteries dead within minutes of entering the den. Digital images often come back corrupted or filled with unexplainable orbs and mists that were not visible to the naked eye. But the most consistent sighting at Devil's Den is the figure known as the hippie. This is the nickname given to a recurring apparition, a man described as barefoot, wearing a floppy hat and ragged, earth-tone clothing. He does not appear transparent, he looks solid, human. He often approaches tourists who are navigating the treacherous rocks. He speaks clearly, usually saying, "What you're looking for is over there," pointing toward Plum Run, a creek that ran red with blood during the battle. When the visitors turn to look and then turn back to thank him, he is gone. There is nowhere to hide in the open rocks, yet he vanishes instantly. Is he a helpful spirit? Or is he a trapped soul, endlessly directing people toward the site of his own death? Not all of the horror occurred on the open fields. Some of it took place within the walls of the town's institutions. To the north lies Gettysburg College. During the battle, the stately Pennsylvania Hall was commandeered as a field hospital. The surgeons worked in the basement to avoid the artillery shells raining down outside. It was a place of unimaginable suffering, where amputations occurred around the clock. The severed arms and legs were thrown out the windows until the pile outside reached the second-story sill. The most famous account from this location comes from two college administrators working late one night. They boarded the elevator on the fourth floor, intending to go to the ground floor to leave for the evening, but the elevator did not stop. It bypassed the ground floor and descended into the basement. When the doors slid open, the women did not see the modern storage room they knew. The electric lights were gone. The room was bathed in the sickly yellow glow of lanterns. The air was thick with the metallic smell of blood and the heat of unwashed bodies. Before them was a scene from 1863, frozen in time. Doctors in blood-smeared aprons moved among wounded soldiers lying on the floor in agony. One of the figures, a surgeon, looked up from his work. He stared directly at the women in the elevator. His eyes were described as hollow, pleading, and terrifyingly aware of their presence. The women frantically hammered the buttons until the doors closed and the elevator ascended. Years later, details from their account, including the specific layout of the room and the uniforms, were cross-referenced with historical records. They matched perfectly. The elevator had not just moved through space, it had pierced the veil of time. In the center of town, the violence invaded the domestic sanctuary of civilians. The Ginny Wade House stands as a grim reminder of collateral damage. Amidst 50,000 military casualties, Mary Virginia Jenny Wade was the only direct civilian death during the battle. She was 20 years old, baking bread for the Union soldiers, when a stray Confederate bullet passed through two doors and struck her in the back. She died instantly in her kitchen. The tragedy is compounded by what was found in her pocket, a picture of her fiancé, Jack Skelly. She did not know that Jack had already been mortally wounded in a different battle days earlier. Neither would live to see the end of the week. The Ginny Wade House is now a museum, but the energy there is heavy with sorrow. Visitors and guides report a specific olfactory phenomenon. In the dead of winter, with the house sealed tight against the cold, the fresh scent of baking bread and the perfume of roses will suddenly fill the kitchen, lingering for moments before vanishing. There is also a more tactile presence reported here. Many guests, particularly fathers, report feeling a tug on their coats or a small hand slipping into theirs. This is believed to be the spirits of the orphan children who were huddled in the cellar while Jenny lay dying upstairs. The house stands as a monument to the interruption of life, and the spirits there seem unable to comprehend why their safety was violated. A few miles away, spanning a quiet creek, sits Sachs-covered bridge. It was a crucial crossing point for the retreating Confederate army after their defeat. But for 3 soldiers, it became the end of the line. Legend dictates that 3 Confederate soldiers were arrested here, attempting to desert the carnage. They were not given a trial. To set an example for the ragged and demoralized army, they were hanged from the rafters of the bridge. This location is a hotbed for electronic voice phenomena. Investigators consistently capture the sounds of coughing, the creaking of heavy rope against wood, and voices speaking in a distinct southern drawl. But the visual phenomena are even more disturbing. Late at night, a thick fog often rolls off the water. Witnesses describe the fog coalescing into 3 distinct shapes inside the bridge, hovering at the exact height of a hanging man. There is a smell here too, not of death, but of pipe tobacco. It is a comforting scent in a terrifying place, perhaps a remnant of the soldier's last request before the rope was tightened. Finally, we turn our eyes to the rocky slopes of Little Round Top. This was the extreme left flank of the Union line. If this hill fell, the war might have ended differently. The 20th Maine, led by Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, ran out of ammunition and ordered a desperate bayonet charge to hold the line. The intensity of energy required to sprint downhill into the face of enemy fire seems to have burned a permanent scar into the hillside. Reenactors and tourists frequently report the overwhelming smell of sulfur and black powder smoke, even when no weapons have been fired for miles. It hits the nose sharp and stinging, then vanishes as quickly as it arrived. Audio recordings taken on windless nights at Little Round Top have captured what sounds like the rebel yell, a high-pitched, terrifying shriek used by Confederate infantry. It is not a sound that can be easily replicated by the wind. It is the sound of pure adrenaline and death, echoing across the decades. Gettysburg today is a place of manicured lawns and marble monuments. It is a place of education and remembrance. But when the sun goes down and the crowds disperse, the veneer of the present day begins to thin. The birds stop singing, the mist rises from the swales, and the silence becomes heavy. Are these ghosts, or are they simply memories, burned so deeply into the earth that they refuse to fade? Perhaps the intensity of July 1863 was too great for the universe to process, leaving the events to replay like a broken record. For the 50,000 who fell here, the war may have ended. But for the ground itself, the battle continues.